production. And so I never felt like frustrated, because that was my job. I was happy. And at the same time, I was very fortunate because, we were one of the top jazz groups in the world at that time. So, we're flying first class, staying in, great hotels, having thousands of people come because, and I don't feel like I sold out because I did like the music and I liked it. I was proud to be on stage with those great musicians playing that great music. But, even historically, like I teach a jazz, bunch of historic jazz classes at the university, but sometimes the books I'll use, on jazz, I won't mention any of them, but whenever they mention Pat Metheny, they never mention me or Rodby. They never mention that particular period, but if they do, it's almost like, well, that was the light kind of commercial, light jazz, faux Brazilian music, which really makes me angry. Because I mean, we're playing stuff in 22/8 and 7/8. We're playing all this complex music, but the music sounded like you could just whistle it in your shower, because we played it so effortlessly, and so I feel like that period of time when I was in the group is kind of misunderstood for really how complicated that music was, and to actually make it sound like that, So I don't know, I haven't followed everything since I left the group. I've heard certain things, with Pat's band, and I think now they might be jamming more or something like that. But when I was in the band, we were going through that sort of Brazilian kind of period in a lot of ways. And we did use sequencers on pretty much everything except maybe 3 or 4 songs, meaning that that you had to stay with the sequencer. You can't just go off and add an extra chorus or whatever. Everything had to be, it was almost like a big band, and even Lyle said it was almost like a big band, that we had these arrangements that we had to stick to. And if you look at the history of big band music, like swing music, there were fantastic musicians, but they would maybe just get 1 or 2 choruses on songs. When bebop came out, all of a sudden it was more about soloing, you know what I mean? And jazz got less popular when that happened too. The swing era is when everyone was dancing and it was like the rock and roll of its time. So, now I don't really care about any of that. I'm just going to play whatever I want to play. I feel like I know what I'm doing. And in the time I have left on the planet, luckily I'm healthy, but everything has changed. And, a lot of young people, you show the CD, no one's got CDs anymore, young people. Which is crazy. So, the whole market has changed. Many things, a lot of times when you mention Pat Metheny, a lot of young musicians, even, they kind of know the name, but they don't really, they're looking at the newer people, right? Everyone's into Snarky Puppy and bands like that. So life goes on, as they say.
Now, you just mentioned, Paul, and I've been talking about this with some people are really into the Pat Metheny Group, but the ECM era. So something happened there because some people really do not, it's not that they don't like it, but they feel a distance with this Brazilian period you call so well. And what happened there? Because there was Geffen records. So obviously there was a difference. There were fantastic pieces like The Last Train Home, which I really, really, really almost cry to all the time. So what happened there? Could you share with us some ideas?
I don't know. I was on the last ECM record with Pat, which was First Circle. And that was still the quartet. There wasn't a lot of sequencers at that time. I think Pat got the synclavier, and then he started orchestrating everything, and then we had to play with those orchestrations. So when we played with that, I know he was really into Milton Nascimento, Clube de Esquinho too. I remember that was a big record that he loved. So we kind of ended up going into that sort of Brazilian mode, Why? I don't know. I mean, that was sort of Pat's decision because it was, it's the Pat Metheny Group. And then, but with all the sequencers, that's what I'm saying. There's less freedom. There's even less space sonically. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm playing a lot of cymbals. There's not a lot of room to do a lot of stuff because you have all this percussion going on. You have all these synth things going on. You have even extra, guitar tracks and everything. So when people heard us live, they'd see 5 or maybe 6 or 7 people on stage, but we sounded like 20 people. Well, it was 20 people, only except maybe 12 of them weren't there. They were recorded, where the ECM period was 4 people or 5 people playing just that.
Okay.
Yeah, because are you going with me? That's with the sequencer, because you have dun 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 dun, and we have to play with that. So I think Pat got comfortable with trying to have like these extra sounds going that we would augment on top of this set piece of music. And that's just where it went, and that's fine. I mean, it was kind of fun in some ways because, the tempos were always the tempo. Because when you play live with people, sometimes people go, "Oh, it's too fast, it's too slow," because they might be in a different, they might be nervous or they're drunk or whatever. But like when you have a sequencer, you can just say, "Hey, don't look at me, man. That's the sequencer. That's right going to be on that tempo no matter what. And if it feels weird to you, that's just because you feel different that time."
And how do you account for people going crazy about that particular piece, which I obviously love? Are you going with me since the very beginning of the story? Even till now, if he comes to wherever he plays, or you, maybe if he could play it, people would recognize it. It became like a hit song. What makes it so different? Well, it's fantastic, of course.
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny because it's got a nice kind of groove to it, and there's the hook, and even that little vamp that I just kind of sang, that's, people can feel that, and that just it's like that. It's like they can relate to that even if they don't know what it is. And then the song builds. It's like a long sexual thing. You know what I mean? It kind of goes and finally it climaxes. Yeah. So it's that kind of piece too, where it builds slowly, and Pat plays great on it too. So I think there's a combination of both those things. I know some people that hate that Roland guitar sound. Some people, they can't stand that, So some people like stuff, some people hate it. And I always tell my students this. I say, just be true to yourself, because people are going to love you for the very reason that other people hate you. It's just the way it is, So if you're not happy with what you're doing and you're trying to make people happy, you're going to lose yourself. And we're all unique. We're all different people on this planet at this particular time. So we really owe it to ourselves and everyone else to be the truest form of who we can be.
Okay, thank you.
So I know, Pat, Paul, that you are a fan of improvisation, and you have released several albums improvising with other artists. And in terms of, if you put that in terms of psychological terms, right?
Yeah.
Improvisation in many ways, if you will, is like living in the present, right? So I'm myself, right? If you have asked me the question, right? As I get older, right, I try to live more in the present. But up to, I don't know, 5 years ago, I was never in the present, either past or future. What I can do better about the stuff that I have done, and what can I do, a year from now, being in school, being career, with my son, with my wife, more gigs, music, whatever. I wasn't living in the present. And so here's the question. So improvisation in many ways is like living in the present, right? You are jamming with a guy, you don't have a music sheet you want to play. The guy start, and you know the piano, and you go to the drum and the sax and the bass, and you guys look one another, and no shit. You can be blindfolded, if you will, and then it sounds very good. How difficult is improvisation?
It's easy. It's easy with good musicians, because like with Wertico, Kane and Gray again, we don't talk about anything when we play. I mean, we don't say we're going to play in 5/4. We're going to play in the key of G flat. No, nothing. We just play. And it all sounds like compositions, because all three of us are, hopefully we're all great musicians. It sounds weird to say, but yeah, we know what we're doing, and we like each other, and we have a conversation, and every conversation is different. And every time we play, say like each record might be recorded, 1 or 6 months from the last record, and 6 months before the next one. In that 6 months, all three of us have grown, so we bring new things to the table all the time, which is interesting, because if you're stuck and you only play the same thing. So the way I even teach drums, if I give a book, say a drum book that everyone else uses, and my students just play the book the way everyone does, just go for exercise, okay, fine. They're going to sound different a little bit, but they're going to sound like everyone else because everyone else has worked on that. But I'll take one exercise and I'll have them try to come up with how many ways can you take this? 20 ways, and then that makes them come up with their version of it as opposed to what I would have done or what some other drummer would have done. So that's the other thing about this is that we try to be unique, so as a professional musician, to work, we have to serve the music because that's the only way you get hired is to make other people feel comfortable. So if you're playing a wedding, you want to get the dance floor packed. If you're playing a bebop gig, you want to swing and you want to support the soloists and make every song, successful in that particular style. And then when you're playing improvised, you can just do whatever you want to do. And the more, like Larry Gray, for instance, he's a virtuoso on like piano, drums, bass, guitar, everything. Dave Kane isn't really like a jazz player, which I love and Larry loves too. So he's not just trying to play Charlie Parker licks. He's got a great sound. He's a great musician. He was into computers too. He did a lot of stuff for Apple. So he's a great filmmaker, and so he brings this other element. So we're not just trying to sound like an ESP record from the 60s. And we're not just trying to sound like some avant-garde thing, which I love, but we're not trying to play like that. And so I think that, it's who you associate with that brings out different parts of you, and then you bring out different parts of them, and certain combinations are just really great, and those are the ones that just last a long time. Other ones you might play for a while, and okay, that was good, but you only have so much time in the day, so you want to be with people that really you want to be with, and that's how that works. It's really easy. You just trust yourself, and you trust them, and you listen. You don't bring in something like, oh, I practiced this today, so I'm going to play this. No, because then you're not in the present. So when you're in the present, like this conversation, you guys are listening to me, I'm listening to you, and it's a different conversation than I would have had with two other people, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah. No, absolutely. Very, very good answer. Now, another sort of psychological question. When you are behind whether it's with Pat Metheny or yourself or with your buddies, whatever that is, behind the drummers, you're not, I imagine that you don't think just about beats, right, or symbols, as if if you go to the Louvre, like when you were in Paris, right, you contemplating a painting, right? Do you think about, I know you need to do this, but do you think about the whole thing, like colors and textures and lights and so on and so forth?
Sure. Every song has a mood,
right?
Whether it's a rap song, whether it's a fusion song, whether it's a bebop song, it has a mood. And so if you're aware of the music, the type of music you have, if it's a style of music, then you're aware of how to make that particular style of music succeed. If you're really experimental, then you might take something and put it into something different. So in other words, like I love to cook. So say, if you have Mexican cuisine, okay. So if you only use what the Mexican cuisine uses, you probably be a good Mexican cook. But if you bring in some Japanese elements, or you bring in some, Spanish elements, or some, whatever, different elements, French cooking elements, all of a sudden you can get these new combinations. You come up with these nouveau cuisines that are different. And it's the same thing with music. And I've always done that because the band Earwax Control, which was the band when I was out of college, I was in that band. We was totally improvised, but we were really funny too. We would put television sets in front of us that we couldn't see and play crazy sounds. And then people would start laughing, and we'd look at the television and it might be Elvis Presley singing, but we're going, we would do a lot of really things that no one would do. I mean, like, so musicians would come to hear us just to watch, like, what are these guys going to do now? And even before digital, I took a cassette one time and I recorded Bela Lugosi, Dracula, Lawrence Welk, the band leader, the Champagne band leader. And I cut them up so that they were actually introducing Earwax Control when I played that on tape before we would, to introduce us. I was always into really experimental things. And most people don't know any of that stuff because, how many Earwax Control records have we sold?
Right, that's right.
It's that. So that's, to me, that's a little sad. Not because of just the recognition, but it's sad because there's some really great music. Well, even my trio with John Mulder, that guitar player, John Mulder.
Yeah.
You probably heard us, right, Claudio? You ever hear that?
I mean, I have 4 CDs from you, from your trio, different type of trios.
Yeah.
Last night I was preparing for the interview. I saw some gigs that you did when you were in Europe with I think it was a Polish band or.
Oh yeah, SBB. I was with that band 7 years.
Very, very different. I mean, if I were to take a look of all your 20 CDs or so, right? And
yeah.
You are a lot more than Pat Metheny, just playing,
I'm on hundreds of records, man.
Right.
I'm on all kind of records, yeah. And I never feel like it's not me. It's just that part of me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. And
well, so a similar question to that, right? So now that you have had more time in your hands, now they are home, more time in your hands. Do you watch your old recordings and try to analyze yourself? And
no, not really. I mean, like when I'm home now, I mean, a lot of times, because I teach, so I'm looking at a lot of documentaries, I'm reading a lot of books, and I'll listen to some music sometimes just for inspiration. I'll just put on like a favorite record that makes me, and I'll hear it with new ears because maybe the last time I heard it might be, 10 years ago. So now I've grown and I have a different perspective. But, to get back to what I was going to say, because I want to finish this, like John Mulder is a great guitar player. We just did another record, but I've done like 7 or 8 records with him. And he's this incredible, great writer. He's an amazing writer, amazing guitar player, one of the best guitar players in the world, as far as I'm concerned. So melodic, but a lot of people don't know him because he's based out of Chicago and he was a Catholic priest for a long time. Wow. So, yeah. So that was, so he chose that path. But to me, I guess to get back to what we're talking about, I'll listen to a lot of the stuff now that hasn't been released. I just found a fantastic trio record with me and John Mulder and this Brian Peters, this brilliant. He's like a genius, just like Lyle was. Maybe not as much all just music, but he's like a computer genius, just a genius, a young kid. And we did this great gig at this club Martyrs in Chicago. So I want to release that because the stuff is amazing, and it's just a matter like, how do you release it now? If you put CDs out, who's going to buy the CDs? If you just give it away, I guess we could just give it away, but that's kind of sad too, because then people don't appreciate stuff as much when it's free. So, the whole Spotify thing has really changed the industry so much because, Spotify sounds, I guess, okay, but a CD on a good stereo, when you're mastering a record, you're mastering it to sound amazing. And then, people listen to a little MP3 with little white headphones, and they don't hear anything. And it's so much of the artistry beyond just the music, but all the details of the music and the recording has gotten lost, which is really so sad. And now they're giving it away. So that even hurts it even more, so then people don't appreciate it. Absolutely. It's a strange situation, but it is what it is right now. Hopefully, I think when the COVID pandemic is done, I think people will want to hear music live again. Hopefully, hopefully the clubs will be able to maintain and stay open because there's, a lot of clubs and restaurants are closing because they have rent. If there's no one, if no one's coming in, they have to close. So it's going to be real interesting to see what happens.
Absolutely, yeah. No, okay. Go ahead, Christian. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Now that you were mentioning it, Paul, the Spotify, I in fact had one question about that. Spotify, Tidal, whatever you mentioned. As you say, young people haven't had the experience of gathering together. When I was younger, I would gather with a couple of friends and have the stereo with the powerful speakers and let yourself, go to other worlds. Now, maybe you could consider, if you're planning or you want to release some interesting material, some people are getting these high resolution files as well, which is the other alternative. CDs use too much space in your home, don't they? But high resolution files are being quite many famous records have come out in high resolution files digitally.
I guess, yeah. The only trouble with that, and this is, I even find myself with this, when you used to have a record, an LP or a CD, but especially a record, you put it on, you have to take care of it. And you usually listen to the whole thing and then you turn it over. When you have like everything in a hard drive, you listen to a little bit and then, let me hear something else. People want to keep moving faster and faster. Yeah. So to listen to, a record, to listen to a 15-minute solo of a saxophone player, on a jazz tune, because, jazz tunes used to be, all the things you are all, the standards used to be Broadway songs, songs from movies and stuff. A lot of kids don't know those standards anymore too. So they're not even standards, they were old standards. So there's new standards now. So everything is completely changed. And so when you have a 4 terabyte drive of, every album that you've ever had, there's that real kind of, what would you call it? There's that temptation to listen to something and then move on, as opposed to like what you're talking about. Yeah, because when, we had LPs, I specifically remember like in high school, we'd gather and someone would have a new record. And who's this? Oh, it's a band called Santana. Oh, let's put them on. And we'd all listen. What's this? This is a new record by, Black Sabbath. Oh, Jimi Hendrix. Or you put out a new record. Oh, this is Coltrane's new record, or this is Ornette's new record. And everyone would sit there and play it and talk about it. A lot of people don't even have time to do that anymore, because now everyone's running around texting, your phone. One thing I refused to do when I was a studio player in Chicago was to get a beeper. The beeper would be like, all of a sudden someone would, okay, then you check and call your service. Oh, there's a session tomorrow at 9:00. Can you make it? I didn't want to be beeped like that. I didn't want to be, like a puppet on a string being taken everywhere. I wanted to have some independence. And now all of us are like that. Everyone's got their phone in their pocket and constantly being, interrupted. Your thoughts are interrupted, your energy, I used to practice 8-12 hours a day, no problem. I mean, who has the time to do that now? Now there's so much going on. So it's changed. It's changed. And I can't say it's better or worse, because, sometimes you sound real old when you say, oh, the old days were better. They were just better for what we were looking for. Young people are living in a different life right now. And I enjoy teaching young people because they teach me a lot about what's going on currently too. And I want to learn the present reality as much as live in the past, because the past is great, but it is gone, No,
it's true. I was going to mention, there was a time when I didn't hear here in Chile, it's less likely to be informed. Lyle Mays, when he left the Pat Metheny Group, nobody knew what was going on. He made a couple of records or maybe more. And I had the chance to hear some live files. But I don't know, what's your impression of having worked with him? It was so shocking, really, when we got to know he got passed. So everybody went like, life is like that. You've mentioned a couple of times when you're not any longer here. Everybody thinks about that every now and then. But when a musician that, brings you so much joy and everything, what's your own impression of having worked with Lyle? That's what I would like to ask you.
Well, I mean, Lyle was like the greatest guy. I mean, he was like just a good soul, you know, he really was. But he was so brilliant. I mean, when I say the word genius, because everyone's a genius nowadays, no, you know, he was a genius. I mean, it didn't matter. I mean, he could have been an architect. He taught himself chess and beat like a state chess master. You know, he was just like, he'd take a Rubik's cube and he'd solve it like in less than a minute. You know, I mean, it was just ridiculous. And his ears, and, you know, he'd hear something and be able to write out anything, you know, like 6 parts. I mean, it was just like frightening. And he was, I can't believe he's gone, you know, but I'm so lucky again to have played with him and to share it. Because, you know, if you listen to stuff, he and I played really well together. You know, there's that one thing from Luna Park. I think it's from, 86 or something, 85, 86. The concert, it's not officially released. It's on YouTube. And the way I hear us playing together, we were bouncing off of stuff, you know, playing Straight on Red and some of those tunes, you know, we were sharing spirits, you know, it was fantastic. And so I you know, it's so sad because I was always hoping in some ways that particular group would do maybe even a summer tour, you know, me, Lyle, Steve, Pat, and Pedro, you know, and maybe Armando too, you know, but that's never going to happen. It's just like the Beatles are never going to be together again, you know, and it's such a definitive ending to something that was so special.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to take it sometimes. Now, I was going to also ask you about the Masters of Resonance documentary. That's the name, right?
Yeah.
The Masters, yeah. I was amazed because I saw a poster, and it's like this great man that also left, Neil Peart. What a genius too. Yeah. Did you ever any connection with him? Did you ever speak to him or met him?
No, I never really met him. I mean, I'm going to be in trouble for this, but I was never a big Rush fan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah. I mean, I loved a lot of prog rock stuff. I loved Yes, you know, Genesis, Rush. It just, I don't know. It just didn't touch me, you know, which doesn't mean that I'm wrong or I'm right or they were good or they weren't good. It has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with, to me, you know, it's like just sometimes music, because we only have so much time, you know. So I was interested in music that I was interested in to learn or that music that touched me. And so there's certain great bands that just, you know, I listen to them and yeah, you know, that's cool, but I'd rather listen to something else. And even drumming style wise, you know, he played, you know, he was a great technician and stuff, but it's just funny how certain people get so famous like that. You know, he was talented. I mean, he wrote the lyrics for that band and everything, but you know, we are who we listen to, just like you are what you eat kind of thing. So you know, like even if we're looking at rock drummers, you know, John Bonham was great, but John Bonham was not my favorite rock drummer. You know, I was more into like Keith Moon and Ginger Baker and Mitch Mitchell's at that time, you know. Why? I don't know. You know, I mean, I liked Led Zeppelin, of course, you know, I mean, but there's certain things that, you know, I just did a thing yesterday, a drum chat from England, and I was turning people on to some people drummers that aren't famous that made a big impact in my life, you know, and just saying like, the reason I am who I am is what I listen to and what I, you know, decide to read and research and all that. And so, you know, Rush is like one of the biggest bands, and I guess deservedly so. But for me, that wasn't a major influence.
Okay. Now, I before I forget, I have to congratulate you, of course, about those 6 Grammys. How many are they behind you? Yeah. Two tiny ones. Why is that? And the rest are bigger.
Well, there's actually 3 different sizes. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah.
Can you see this? What I'm circling? You can't see what I'm
No,
certain.
you can see.
No,
You can?
no,
No, I cannot.
I see four of them are similar. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
So the two on the each end are those are the newest ones. Those are a bigger size.